My name is Emily, and if someone had told me 3 years ago that my entire life would come crashing down in a matter of weeks, I wouldn't have believed them. I used to be that woman with big dreams and a bigger heart, working hard as a marketing executive, married to a man I thought was the love of my life. His name was Jake. We'd been together for 5 years, married for 2. People used to call us the perfect couple. We laughed a lot, traveled, built plans for the future. My boss was kind, but the company couldn't keep someone who was constantly calling in sick or needing time off. Jake wasn't home. I called him over and over again until he finally answered and told me he was getting some space. My family, well, they weren't in the picture. My mom had passed years ago, and my dad and I hadn't spoken since I married Jake. They didn't like him, and I chose love over family. I was left with nothing. No job, no husband, no home of my own. But I sat at that old public computer in the shelter, designing a simple logo for a small business in town. Jake might have walked away when I was sick and helpless, but he hadn't seen the woman I was about to become. They found me through an online freelance site. It paid $25, but it felt like $1,000,000. That was the first dollar I made on my own since Jake left. It was small, but it was mine. That night, I looked up at the ceiling and whispered, "Watch me rise." Jake stopped paying the rent on our apartment, and I was eventually evicted. I had to move into a shelter for a while. Just imagine that, from a corporate office to a shelter bed in just a few months. That was my reality. I asked him what that meant, and he said, "Emily, I can't do this anymore." I cried myself to sleep every night, asking why this was happening to me. On the days I could get out of bed, I walked. On days I couldn't, I read, I wrote in my journal, and I looked for any online job I could do from a laptop in the shelter's common room. I began learning new skills, graphic design, social media marketing, even basic coding. I didn't know what I was doing at first, but I kept trying. No one was coming to save me. I had to save myself. I had always given love, worked hard, done my best to support others. But life had turned its back on me. I wanted to give up so many times. But something inside me, some small piece that refused to die, kept whispering, "This isn't the end." I didn't sign up for this kind of life. He hung up. Just like that. No warning. No goodbye. He didn't come home that night. Or the night after. Losing that job felt like losing a piece of my identity. I had always been independent. Now I was relying on Jake financially, emotionally, and every time I asked for something, even basic help, he made me feel guilty. But life has a cruel way of revealing someone's true character when things go wrong. It started with exhaustion. Not the kind you get after a long workday, but the kind that wraps around your bones and never lets go. It was the silence that followed. Not a single call. Not a single message to ask how I was. He moved on with his life while I struggled to survive each day. That broke something in me. But it also built something new, a kind of strength I didn't know I had. I realized I had survived things many people couldn't even imagine. And I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was rebuilding. I couldn't get out of bed without feeling like I had run a marathon. He held my hand, but I could feel it, a distance forming, a shift I couldn't explain. At first, he acted supportive, saying we'd get through this together. I believed him. I needed to. But that support didn't last long. As my health got worse, Jake started pulling away. It was subtle at first, coming home late, sleeping in the other room, making excuses to avoid doctor's appointments. When I needed him most, he started treating me like a burden. My joints ached, my skin started reacting to sunlight, and I was constantly running a low-grade fever. I tried ignoring it at first, thinking I was just stressed. But when I collapsed at work one day, I knew it was more than just fatigue. After weeks of tests, scans, and waiting rooms, the doctor finally gave me the news: I had lupus, an autoimmune disease that would change my life forever. Jake was sitting beside me when the doctor told us. I lost my job within a few months of being diagnosed. Then came the day that shattered me. I woke up in bed, barely able to move, my joints swollen and skin covered in rashes. I begged him to come back. I was in pain, scared, alone, and completely broke. The pain wasn't just physical anymore, it was emotional. I started doing small things to pull myself back. What hurt the most during that time wasn't just Jake's abandonment. I remember one night clearly. It was cold, my body ached all over, and I hadn't eaten a proper meal in 2 days. Little did I know then that this was the start of something bigger than I ever imagined. After earning that first $25 from designing a logo, something shifted inside me. I realized I wasn't useless, even if lupus had tried to convince me otherwise. On good days, I learned new design tools or watched online tutorials about freelancing. On bad days, I wrote down goals or ideas, even if they felt silly or impossible. It was hard. Sometimes I would cry in frustration when my fingers ached too much to hold a mouse or when brain fog made it hard to focus. But I never let a day go by without trying. I got certified in digital marketing through a free online program. I built my own website. I branded myself as a freelancer for small businesses and offered packages for logos, branding, and social media help. Soon, I had enough clients to quit relying on any donations or shelter programs. I was making my own money, paying my own bills, and slowly getting back on my feet. That one small win gave me a reason to believe in myself again. A friend I met through the community center recommended me. I could have deleted it and moved on. But something in me smiled. Instead, I opened my task board and got back to work for clients who respected me, who paid well, and who believed in second chances. I had come too far to look back. It wasn't anger, it wasn't pain, it was power. Not because I would do something petty, but because I had finally built a life where seeing his name no longer made me feel small. At first, I panicked. Speak? In front of people? My hands still trembled sometimes. I was now helping bigger companies and even hired 2 part-time assistants to help with client communication and editing. I rebranded my business and gave it a name, Rise Creative Studio, because that's exactly what I had done. I had risen. And art on the walls, I got an email from a wedding planning company. They wanted help with branding and content for a huge event. As I scrolled through the attachments, my heart stopped for a second. There was Jake's name, he was the groom. My voice still cracked when I talked about the past. But something inside me said, do it. Tell your story. Clients would send small tasks, and I'd do them late at night after my pain had eased a little. I stood on that stage in front of 50 people and told them everything: the diagnosis, the collapse, the shelter, the heartbreak. I thought I'd feel embarrassed. But instead, something powerful happened. People listened. They cried. They clapped. Without anyone saving me. Without needing to prove anything to anyone except myself. The girl who once cried herself to sleep in a shelter bed was now sending out contracts to corporate clients and managing a team. The same girl who thought her life had ended was now designing a new one, piece by piece. And afterward, they came up to me, one after another, asking for my card, offering work, asking to collaborate. Word spread slowly. A bakery needed social media posts. A hair salon needed a flyer. I took every job, big or small. At first, I used to check his social media pages, wondering what he was doing, if he had someone new, if he ever thought about me. But one day, I realized I didn't care anymore. He had left me when I was at my worst. That wasn't love, it never was. It took me a long time to understand that walking away said more about his character than my worth. My income was inconsistent, but it was enough to start saving. I also connected with a local community center that helped women find affordable housing. They placed me in a tiny studio apartment. It wasn't much, but it had a door that locked and a bed that was mine. I hadn't had either in almost a year. I was still living in the shelter, still struggling to manage my health, and still broke, but that moment made me feel like I had some control again. I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could find my way back. I made a promise to myself every day, no matter how hard or how sick I felt, I would do at least one thing to improve my future. Within a few months, I had built a small online portfolio and started getting more work. My health was still up and down. Some mornings I couldn't even stand up without help, and I still had hospital visits and days I couldn't work. But something beautiful happened. I stopped feeling ashamed of that. I stopped thinking of myself as weak because I was sick. I started seeing myself as strong because I kept showing up even when everything hurt. During this time, I cut off all thoughts of Jake. Instead of focusing on the past, I poured everything into my new beginning. Then came an opportunity that changed everything. A small business network in the city was looking for a speaker, someone who had overcome challenges to become self-employed. So I did. That event gave me a boost I never expected. Within a few months, my freelance work tripled. But the best part? I did it all without Jake. One day, while sipping coffee in my apartment, a much nicer one now, with sunlight pouring through the windows of all the companies, of all the people, it was his fiancée's wedding brand that landed in my inbox. I could have ignored it. I didn't reply to that email. There's a kind of peace that comes after you survive your worst days. I had lived through pain I never thought I could handle, physical, emotional, and spiritual. A woman named Sandra from a well-known women's empowerment magazine reached out. She had seen my name pop up during a local entrepreneurs conference, and someone had recommended me as the woman who built an empire after illness. Her words surprised me. Empire? I laughed a little to myself, because I still saw myself as a freelancer working from a small home office. Soon, I was being asked to speak on virtual panels, mentor young designers, and even give advice to nonprofit groups that supported women re-entering the workforce. I never saw myself as a motivational speaker, but I had become one without even trying. All I did was tell the truth. I had never been to one before. I borrowed a sleek black dress from a friend and had my hair done at a nearby salon. I didn't expect to win anything, I thought I was just there to network and support others. Someone who still knew Jake. But when the Resilience in Business Award was announced, and they called my name, I froze in place. The room clapped, cameras flashed, and I walked onto that stage, heart pounding, lips trembling, trying not to cry. Part of me didn't want to go back there, to the time when I was sick and scared and abandoned. But another part of me knew that my story had come full circle. I had survived what was meant to destroy me. And now, people who once looked down on me were watching me rise. But to others, my story was becoming something bigger. I didn't need to. That night, I sat down at my desk and wrote something in my journal that I still look at every morning, and no idea how I was going to survive, I said. Today, I stand here not because I never fell, but because I refused to stay down. Now, I was defined by what I had done after he left. We started getting more serious clients, fashion boutiques, health coaches, small tech startups. I trained a full-time assistant and hired 2 part-time designers. I began saying no to work that didn't align with my values and yes to projects that felt meaningful. I even created a special offer for women-owned startups, giving them affordable packages to help them get started. I remembered how hard it was when I had nothing, and I wanted to give back now that I had something. And now, waking up in my sunny apartment, checking my client list, and sipping hot coffee, I felt something new in my chest: pride. I was proud of how far I had come. No one had handed me anything. I had earned every bit of my healing and success. But what I didn't know yet was that the world was beginning to notice me, quietly, silently, and steadily. One afternoon, I was working on a client's website when I received a message on LinkedIn. It read, "Sandra wanted to interview me for a feature in their online magazine." I hesitated at first. Jake's going to lose it when he finds out who you've become. Talking publicly about my sickness and the man who left me still felt scary. But I also knew there was power in my truth. So I agreed. We set up a Zoom call, and for the first time on camera, I shared my story, not just as someone who survived, but as someone who thrived. I talked about the pain, the fear, the loneliness, and the little victories that slowly brought me back. I was honest about the nights I cried alone, the times I wanted to give up, and the strength I didn't know I had until I needed it. The interview went live a week later. I expected a few likes or comments, maybe a message or two. But I wasn't ready for what happened next. My inbox exploded. Messages poured in from women around the country, single moms, divorced women, women with chronic illnesses, even college girls who said they were inspired by my courage. Some thanked me for giving them hope. Others asked how they could start a business while battling their own health issues. I read every message, often with tears in my eyes. For the first time, I didn't feel alone anymore. That magazine feature led to another. A podcast reached out, then a local business radio show. Meanwhile, Rise Creative Studio, my business, was thriving. Then something strange happened. I got invited to an awards night. It was one of those fancy galas, black tie, big lights, velvet tablecloths. I looked out at the crowd and smiled. A few years ago, I was lying in a hospital bed with no money, no job, no family. That speech made its way to social media. I didn't know it at the time, but someone from my old life had seen it. A few days later, I got a text from an unknown number. "Emily? I saw your video. I can't believe how far you've come." I stared at the message for a long time, unsure how to feel. I didn't reply to the text. Let your healing be louder than your hurt. What Jake had done to me, leaving me when I was at my lowest, had once defined me. But not anymore. I was living proof that a broken heart, a sick body, and an empty bank account couldn't stop a woman who chose to rebuild. And fate, it seemed, wasn't done with me yet. It was a quiet Saturday morning when the past came knocking again. I was curled up on my couch with my laptop, organizing some design proposals and half listening to a cozy jazz playlist, when I noticed an email notification. At first, I thought it was just another business inquiry, but the subject line stopped me cold. It read, "Wedding invitation, Jake and Clara." My breath caught in my chest. Jake. After all these years, I hadn't heard his name in anything official. Not because I had any interest in his new bride or their fake fairy tale. What if I broke down in front of everyone? But another part of me, the stronger, braver part, kept whispering, "You've changed." I rented a beautiful navy blue dress, got my makeup done professionally, and wore the heels I saved for special events. Guests were already walking toward the main garden, laughing and chatting, dressed in their finest. I kept my head high and walked through the gates like I belonged there, because, in a strange way, I did. I wasn't the broken girl anymore. I was the woman who had put herself back together. I didn't go to show off. I went to show up, for myself. My assistant, Maria, offered to go with me for support, but I told her I needed to do this alone. "You're not the same woman he left." That voice won. "I wasn't sure you'd come." but because this was the chapter one had never truly closed. I had healed. I had rebuilt. I had succeeded. But I had never faced him again. Some faces looked vaguely familiar, probably friends of Jake's from years ago. One of his cousins, Rachel, noticed me and rushed over. "I feel amazing," I said, and I meant it. "Emily? Is that really you?" Her eyes went wide with surprise. "I didn't send the invite. Clara did." He was right. But I didn't need his apology to move on. "But I'm glad I came. Not for you. For me. She read about you and thought it would be healing." "Oh my gosh, you look amazing." "I can't believe you came." He had no idea what healing had really meant for me, the nights I couldn't sleep, the mornings I didn't want to wake up, the silent battles I fought with my own body and heart. He started walking toward me, slower than necessary, his face unreadable. I was a coward back then. My heart beat faster, not from love, but from years of unsaid hurt. She hugged me tight and whispered, "You look like a queen. Everyone's going to freak out." Then, like in a slow-motion movie scene, I saw him. Jake. When Clara walked down the aisle, glowing and graceful, I saw them exchange vows and promises that I hoped he would keep this time. And I didn't feel anger. I felt peace. To the future, I'm ready. Standing near the altar, straightening his tie, smiling at someone across the garden. He looked happy, relaxed. I wondered if he ever thought about me. If he knew I was here. Never looked him in the eye since the day he walked out. Maybe I needed that moment, not for revenge, but for myself. Some looked shocked, others impressed. A few even came over to tell me how inspiring my magazine story had been. Apparently, my rise hadn't gone unnoticed after all. And now, there it was, sitting in my inbox like a ghost I never asked for. I stared at the screen for a while. Clara? I didn't recognize the name. Maybe she was the woman he left me for, or maybe someone new. It didn't matter. What mattered was that someone, maybe him, maybe her, had thought it was a good idea to send me an invite. I clicked it open, half out of curiosity, half disbelief. It was a sleek digital card with fancy script and soft pink florals. Their smiling faces were tucked in the corner. He looked older but almost the same, clean-shaven, confident, like he'd never known what it was like to walk away from someone when they needed you most. At first, I thought maybe this was a mistake. Why would Jake invite me, the woman he abandoned when I was at my weakest, to his wedding? Was it guilt? Was it to show off how well his life had turned out? Or was it something else entirely? I closed my laptop and tried to shake it off, but the message kept tugging at the back of my mind. I could have deleted it, ignored it, moved on. But instead, I took a deep breath and said aloud, "Maybe I need to go." Not because I wanted to see him. Over the next few weeks, I went back and forth. Part of me wanted to avoid the whole thing. What if it opened old wounds? The wedding was being held at a high-end vineyard just outside the city. As I pulled into the vineyard's driveway, my stomach twisted with nerves. I stayed quiet at first, blending into the crowd, sipping sparkling water and observing. Then something unexpected happened. I smiled politely, not sure what to say. Within minutes, a small buzz started. People whispering, glancing, pointing gently. Then, as if drawn by the whispers, Jake finally saw me. His eyes locked onto mine across the crowd. For a moment, everything went still. No music, no chatter, just the weight of 100 unspoken things between us. "Emily," he said when he reached me. "I wasn't sure either," I replied, my voice steady. He looked me up and down, maybe realizing just how much had changed. "You look amazing." "Thank you." There was an awkward pause before he spoke again. "Healing." That word sat in my stomach like a stone. "I've already healed, Jake." He nodded, maybe unsure how to respond, maybe realizing the moment had shifted. "You deserve all the success, Emily." I didn't correct him. As the ceremony began and everyone took their seats, I stood at the edge of the garden, watching from a distance. Before I left, I wrote a simple note and left it at the guest table. "To the past, thank you for the lessons." And with that, I walked away, not just from the wedding, but from every shadow that had followed me since Jake left. I wasn't just healed. I was free. After that strange but peaceful day at Jake's wedding, something shifted inside me. It felt like I had finally closed a chapter that had been open for too long. There was no bitterness left, no ache when I thought of him. I was proud of the woman I had become, and I wanted to live my life with full joy, no longer looking back. I went home that evening, slipped off my heels, and stood in front of the mirror for a long time. He didn't just walk away from a relationship. He walked away from me, from my pain, my fear, my future. They saw me not as a victim, but as someone who had turned pain into power. After the talk, women came up to hug me, thank me, and share their own stories. It felt like I had found a new family, one made not by blood, but by experience and strength. People from my past, high school friends, old coworkers, even some distant relatives, started reaching out. The words were simple: "I saw your story. I'm sorry for everything." I don't deserve a response, but I wanted to say that. It was Jake. I had become my own rescue, my own home. And no one could ever take that from me again. They wanted to reconnect, to say they were proud, to invite me to coffee. Some, I welcomed back. Others, I kept at a distance. I had learned to be kind, but also careful. I had no money, no strength, and no family to turn to. But what I had was a little hope and a fire inside me that refused to go out. Not because I was angry, but because I didn't need to. My silence was the loudest answer. I had become something he would never understand, not just successful, but fulfilled. And I hadn't done it for revenge. I had done it for myself. I looked at myself, the same body that had once been fragile and sick, the same face that had cried through lonely nights, and I smiled. Others nodded with knowing eyes. I told them everything, not just the heartbreak, but the fight to get up every day and try again. I talked about lupus, how it changed my body and my life, but also how it gave me clarity. They had seen the live stream and wanted to feature my journey in their next cover story. I couldn't believe it. The article came out 2 weeks later with the title, "From Rock Bottom to the Boardroom: How Emily Rose Beat the Odds." It spread fast. Within days, my inbox was overflowing with messages, opportunities, collaborations, and invitations to talk shows. I even got a letter from a young woman battling the same illness who told me that seeing my story gave her the courage to keep going. That one message meant more to me than all the business deals combined. Me, the girl who had once begged her landlord for an extra week's rent, was about to be on a national magazine cover. I sat down and cried. Not from sadness, but from deep, overwhelming gratitude. I talked about designing from my hospital bed, about selling handmade art when I could barely walk, and about slowly building a business from scratch. I had come far. And now, it was time to go even further. The next few weeks were like a burst of fresh energy. I poured myself into my work with more confidence than ever. My small design studio had started gaining attention online, and clients from different states were reaching out. One day, I received an invitation to speak at a national women's leadership conference in New York. They wanted me to share my story, not just about the business, but about surviving lupus, being abandoned, and rebuilding my life. At first, I hesitated. I had never spoken on a stage before, not like that. But something inside me said, do it. Tell them. Preparing for that talk was one of the most emotional things I'd ever done. I wrote and rewrote my speech, going back through memories I had tucked away, the diagnosis, the hospital days, the empty fridge, the nights I stared at the ceiling wondering if I would ever feel whole again. But I also remembered the victories, the first sale on my website, the day I opened my office, the day I stopped waiting for anyone to save me. That was the story I wanted to tell. When the day of the conference came, I wore a crisp white suit that made me feel powerful and calm. I stood backstage, holding my notes, breathing slowly. The hall was packed. Women of all ages filled the seats, their eyes warm and expectant. As I walked onto the stage, my heart beat wildly, but I didn't let the nerves win. I looked at the crowd, smiled, and began. I'm Emily, and a few years ago, I was left by the man I loved because I got sick. The room was silent as I spoke. Some women wiped tears. By the end of the speech, the audience stood and clapped. Not out of pity, but pride. That night, I got a call from one of the biggest lifestyle magazines in the country. The photo shoot was like a dream. They dressed me in elegant outfits, did my makeup with care, and listened to me like my story truly mattered. As my face and story appeared across social media, TV, and magazines, I noticed something strange. Then one evening, I got a message from an unknown number. I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't reply. With my studio now expanding and a book deal in the works, I finally felt like I was living the life I had once dreamed about during those lonely, sick nights. It had been 2 years since Jake left me, and my life had changed more than I ever thought possible. I had gone from lying in a hospital bed, weak and hopeless, to standing on magazine covers, sharing my story with the world, and running my own company. The pain I once carried had slowly turned into strength. It didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't easy, but it happened, and I was proud of myself. For a second, my heart froze. I hadn't seen him in person since his wedding. He took a deep breath. I've seen everything you've done. The interviews, the articles. There was a time when hearing those words would have broken me. But now? They didn't hurt. They just confirmed what I already knew, that he had been the weak one, not me. You don't need to go back. We're not meant to go back. Life moves forward. I hope you've learned something. I hope you treat people better next time. I took a breath and said, Jake, I'm not angry anymore. But I've moved on. I became who I am because I had to. Not because I wanted to prove anything to you, but because I had to save myself. You've become someone amazing. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. I was a coward. I wouldn't be here if it had. I found strength I didn't know I had. And I found a life I never thought I deserved, all because I chose to fight, even when everyone else gave up on me. You're everything I wasn't strong enough to be beside. I wish I could go back. I had taken the pain and turned it into purpose. And in doing so, I had written a new story for myself, one that didn't end in heartbreak but in power, healing, and hope. I left when I should have stayed. I didn't know how to handle what was happening, and instead of trying, I ran away. I felt free, like the last piece of the past had finally been laid to rest. That night, I went home, sat on my couch, and looked out the window. The stars were bright, and the city below glowed with life. I thought about everything, the pain, the sickness, the heartbreak, and I realized it had all led me here. He looked older, tired even, with a forced smile on his face. It told the full story, not just about Jake, but about lupus, loneliness, hope, and becoming whole again. We helped them with housing, treatment support, and job training. It felt like my purpose had finally come into full light. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was helping others survive too. The book hit the bestseller list within days. Messages poured in from women and men all over the world who had felt broken, abandoned, or lost. They said my story gave them the courage to keep going. That was worth more to me than any magazine cover or business deal. He said, "Emily, can we talk for a minute?" Still, there was one more moment I didn't realize I needed until it came. One afternoon, I was invited to speak at a local charity gala in my hometown. There were kids laughing, women hugging each other, and volunteers preparing care packages. A reporter asked me, "Emily, do you ever wish your story had gone differently?" It was being held at one of the big hotels where Jake and I had once gone for a wedding years ago. I hesitated for a moment when I saw the venue name, but something inside me said, "It's time." This wasn't about him anymore. This was about me showing up as the woman I had become in the very place where I was once seen as weak and broken. The event was full of warm people, many of whom had followed my journey online. I walked in with confidence, wearing a deep blue dress that I had designed myself. I had come full circle, not just as a survivor, but as a leader. The evening went beautifully. I spoke about healing, about rebuilding your life when it falls apart, and about how pain can shape us into stronger versions of ourselves. The crowd clapped, cheered, and even cried. I was filled with so much gratitude. That night felt like a celebration of every step I had taken. After the speech, as I was making my way through the crowd, someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around and saw Jake standing there. I looked around, unsure for a moment, then nodded and walked with him to a quieter corner of the room. I listened quietly. He looked down, almost ashamed, and then said, "You've replaced me in every way." I gave him a small smile. And with that, I walked away. I didn't cry. I didn't feel heavy. A few weeks later, my memoir was published. The title was simple, "Still Standing." With the success of the book and my company, I started a foundation for women battling chronic illnesses who had been left behind, by partners, by families, or by society. One day, I stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony of our first community center. I thought for a moment, then smiled and said, "No." That was the truth. Life hadn't been fair, but I had made it beautiful anyway.